Greetings, this is M squared and we're going to talk about piecewise functions. Now, for some reason, this really messes with kids' minds. It's really confusing to them to have some function, remember this is just y in disguise, f of x, that actually has three different things, or sometimes there's two different things. I chose three because it's a little more complicated in that way. You have an extra chance to see three different ones. So you got to keep in mind this is the really important stuff, because this tells you what x can be when this function equals one of these. And so it's kind of like combining parts of three different equations. So if I didn't have that there, you would know that this is a line with the slope of 2 and a y-intercept of -1. You would know this was a horizontal line because there's no x, and when you have y equals just a number, that's always a horizontal line. And you would know that this was another line with a slope of -1 and a y-intercept of 0. So you already know those things. Those are the important things. These just tell you what x's you're allowed to put into these equations. So on this one, I'm only allowed to put x's that are less than or equal to -3. So let's do that one first. So I always put either the biggest or the smallest number that I'm allowed to put in. So since this is the biggest number I'm allowed to put in, I'll start with that. When I put a -3 in here, I get 2 times -3, which is 6, -6, minus 1, which is 7. So what I just found out is when I put a -3 in, I got a -7. So I'm going to graph that point. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you can do the work. You can say 2 times -3 minus 1, -6 minus 1 equals 7, -7. So actually that one point is really important, but you can't pick points that are bigger than that because x's that are bigger than that, because it says you can only use x's that are less than -3 or equal to -3 for that particular one. So I have to choose one that's smaller than -3, so I'm going to choose -4. Now I could go through this whole thing and figure it out and get -9, which you would, but it's also nice to just see the slope. The slope is up 2 over 1, but I just can't go that way because it says I can't pick numbers that are bigger than -3. I can only pick numbers that are smaller. So I really have to go down 2 and over 1. So here is my line, or this is this part of the piecewise function. So now I have to move on to this one because my graph doesn't go any further that way. So now I'm going to move on to this one. I know it's a horizontal line, but I know that when I put a -3 in, I kind of like to put an open circle around that it can't actually equal -3, but that at -3 I'm going to have an open circle. Well, at -3, I'm up 1, because that's what it says. It says I'm 1 between these numbers, between -3 and 1, not including -3 and 1. So I put another open circle at the other side of 1, and then I know that everything in between has to be a 1 because it says it has to be a 1 when x is -2 or -1 or 0, but it can't actually be at those two spots. So that's why the open circles are there. So for our last one, we know that this is, a slope of -1, but I can only use numbers. I should have put a 1 there, and then ... to 1, but we got 1. Okay, so now I can actually put 1 in. It's not an open circle, it can actually equal 1 here. And when I put a 1 in there, I get a -1. Well, let's pick a number bigger than that. That was the smallest one, so let's pick a 2. If I put a 2 in there, I get a -2. And et cetera, et cetera. If I put a 3 in, I get a -3. Or my slope is just down 1, right 1. So I'm going to go to 1, -1, and I'm going to put a closed circle. And then I can just use my slope, or I can use the numbers I just got from my chart. And then I have that. Now sometimes these things are connected and sometimes they're not, but you'll see that these ones aren't, but sometimes they are, and I chose ones that aren't just so you can kind of separate them from each other. And they're not always linear either. I chose to do all lines, but sometimes you can have a parabola with a linear function. Okay, so that I wanted to show you how when you're given the function how to make the graph, but now I'm going to show you how to, when you have the graph, to make the function, which sometimes kids think is a little more difficult. So first I'm going to do the easy part. Like, which one of those do you think is the easy part? I think this one is, because I know it's 2, and I can see that it's between 0 and -4. So I know that -4 is the smallest and 0 is the biggest. I know that they're open circles, so I don't have lines under them, and I know that that y is 2 when x is between -4 and 0. So that to me is the easiest one. And then this one looks easy too because I have the y-intercept. I know it's a line, so I have the y-intercept. So I go down 1, 2, 3, 4. So I know my y-intercept is -4. And then I check out to see what my slope is. 1, 2, 3 over 2, 1, 2, 3 over 2. So I know my slope is 3 over 2. So I know the equation of this line is 3/2 x minus 4. But which x's? You see how it didn't keep going. It only started at an x of 0. So I know that x has to be greater than or equal to 0 for this function. This part of the function, I should say. So now this one's a little more challenging because I don't have the y-intercept. But what I do is I just say, well, what would the y-intercept be? Well, let's see what my slope is. 1/3, because I go up 1 over 3. So I know it's going to be 1/3 x. And then I just keep going up 1 over 3 until I hit my y. And I'm like, oh, there it is. That's 8. So it must be plus 8. And what x's am I allowed to use? Well, I wasn't allowed to use any of these. It started right there. I think that's -6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It started at -6 and went that way. So x must have to be less than or equal to -6 because there was a closed circle there, not an open circle. And so I just showed you how to go from a graph to a function and from a piecewise function to a graph. These are challenging, but you can do it if you go slow. And make sure you ask questions from your teacher because this is really confusing to some kids. Take it slow, and you can do it. M squared, signing out.